Now, this was a short presentation, so I know we have scheduled for a while. I'm hoping there's some question and answers because really I think the Q&A portion is really going to dive into some of the benefits and questions that we're looking at for that. And I think there is a couple questions in chat.
Yep. So we have
okay.
one question. If a family already has a 529 plan, can it be transferred into an IUL?
So yes, but not easily. There are no rules that I'm aware of being able to like 1035 that from that 529 into the IUL. So it's not like moving from like one insurance contract to another, because they are different vehicles. You'd have to think about it as if I have an investment in an account that has this amount of money, I want to transfer it, you know, you're probably going to be hit with penalties and fees before you're able to put it into an IUL. So can it happen? Yes. Is it as easy as like a normal 1035 between two similar products? It is not. With that said, if that's something a family is looking at, it would be good to see that even with that hit to, you know, the money that they have in there, if an IUL would still outperform them in the future with the fact that they have that income that can have been after, as well as have enough money to pay for the expenses with all the other features that an IUL has. So it's definitely something to talk to one of our brokerage managers about. If you do have a client like that, because then we can dig into the numbers and see, is that a smart transfer for them, or should they stay with the 529 and continue funding that based off of what they have?
Cool. And I personally have a question. So
Sure.
what happens to a 529 if, let's say, like the child doesn't go to college?
So if the child doesn't go to college, now anytime you want to access that money, it's going to be the same as we looked at on the income portion of that. You're going to be hit with a 10% fee, and then also most likely an income tax on that. So can you access the money from the policy? Yes. If it's for a non-qualified expense, you are going to have to pay that penalty as well as tax on it. So that's where the versatility of an IUL comes in, because you're not locked into having to use those funds for one particular purpose. You're really able to use those funds for any need that you might have. And as those needs change, the way you can use those funds change. Maybe, you know, the client child gets a full ride and you don't need that, but then they want to start a business after. The money that you could have used, take it from your IUL, and then use that as you know, seed money, versus having to take that hit from the 529. And as we saw, the 529 is not able to sustain those types of withdrawals for a long time after, based on the fact that you are removing the asset, thus removing its growth. I think we have another question in there as well.
We have another question. Yep. Is it possible to take the excess from the 529 after paying for education without being hit with penalties and/or taxes? Or does it have to be used for education purposes?
So the 529 does have to be used for educational purposes. Anything that is after that does have to be for qualified expense. So there are some ways to potentially move that money. I think I see a message from Tom in there as well. Thank you, Tom. Move that money into an IRA or another investment vehicle under certain conditions. But anytime that you use that money or touch that money for non-education expense, there are going to be some restrictions, penalties, and other kind of things that you have to look at. It's not as easy as saying the child's education is done, I get the extra money. The way that you should be playing a 529, which is very hard because you have to base on the market, is you want to basically fund it with just enough to pay for the college expenses, but you don't know what the college expenses are going to be like in 15 to 20 years from now. You don't know what return you're going to get. So most people end up overfunding a 529 to make sure that they have that money available, which means that they do end up with excess money that they then have to figure out what to do with. 529 can change beneficiaries, so you can have multiple children on there, but there are things you can do with that, but it really is educational expenses that it's designed for, which is why it's the low fees and stuff, because it's locked into what that money can do without any other restrictions.
And I know, so a lot of parents have multiple children. So
Mhm.
is one better than the other for funding?
I would say if you have multiple children, I would probably go to something like an IUL, only because you now have that ability to fluctuate what you can take out and have that growth all rolled into one. So instead of funding multiple plans at different times, as you have a child, 1 year, have a new child, 3 years less, if you're funding an IUL through that, you can then take out more money. We showed 65,000. You could take out more than that and still have the policy work. But just note that that would then affect the income you get later. But you do have that flexibility within an IUL to adjust what you're going to use it for and how much you take out at any given time, and also over any given period. So you may do 3 years of one amount, 1 year of double that amount because you have both children in college, and then 3 more years at a reduced amount. As long as it's funded correctly, an IUL would be able to sustain that.
And we have another question that came in. So many educators have modest discretionary income. What are the realistic contribution levels that make an IUL viable and not over leveraged?
So that's really going to depend on kind of what their return they want on the other end is. So um, you are correct that when you're looking at these types of plans, there is that ability to overfund it, but it's really going to be what is it that you're trying to fund in the end. If your sights are on a state school or something that may have a lower cost, you know what I mean? It's really or you're trying to plan for Harvard. So the contribution levels are going to kind of determine what that final result will be and how much towards the education expense that you're going to want to put in there. And that's the same thing with contributing to an IUL. You could run illustrations. We showed 15,000. You could run illustrations for 2 or 3,000 a year, which might be a more realistic scenario for a lot of people. But you're not going to get out 65,000 over the 4 years. So just like any type of investment product, the kind of what you put in is going to determine what you're able to get out. I hope that answered your question. It's not as simple as there's a number that you need to do in there. It really is what is the client comfortable for, and if they have needs other than just the education, then the IUL starts making a lot more sense because the money that they're putting in is now being able to be used for more than one type of thing.
And we have another question that came in. So what
Okay.
happens to the 529 fines if the parents die?
So that's a good question. There is going to be a beneficiary on that. There is a ability to transfer ownership on those, but it's still going to be locked to educational expenses for the child. So having the parents die does not like get you a payout like it would in life insurance, which is why, like I said, when we were looking at that example of someone passing 3 years into the funding, you're kind of locked into the funding that was there, having to grow, and it doesn't get paid out in any way once they pass. And that's the same thing that happens. Let's say you're looking at those income years, like you're taking the income from the 529. There's not an ability to when the client passes, say, okay, well, we're going to pay the rest of this out. It's still locked for educational purposes. they were able to take it out with those penalties, unlike an IUL where if they happen to pass during those income years, the full death benefit would be paid out.
And we have another question that came in. Can you break down the commission and administrator fee structures of IULs?
Uh, in a nutshell, each IUL is going to have a little bit of separate fees, but because it's an insurance product, you're going to be paying. There's a death benefit fee. There's, you know, there's going to be fees in an IUL that affect the performance. Most companies' illustrations will show what those fees are in any given year. As for the commission, that's a question to talk with the brokerage manager on. We pay really competitive commissions, and a lot of them are going to be really good value for the money versus what you might make if you were to sell that 529 plan as well for that same type of structure. So I hope that answered your question, but the admin fee is really going to be based off of what product you sell for which company on kind of what those fees and levels are, as they do differ slightly from carrier to carrier. But all those numbers that I showed you in the IUL illustration were including fees. So this, surrender value is the amount of value you have in the policy after all fees have been taken out every given year. So that would be any loan interest you have to pay on the outstanding loan. That's any policy fees, death benefit, admin fees. That surrender value is net of all those fees, saying like this is what your true value is each given year in the policy.
And I have a question. Can
Yep.
either option be used for private school or non-traditional education?
So IUL, yes, you can use it for whatever you want. 529, it has to be a qualified. I have not read that you are not able to, but I will be honest that I have not looked up if private schools can be used for that funding. So I would have to circle back with everybody on that. I don't want to give incorrect information. I don't believe there's any restriction, but let me double check that to make sure that that's just because I haven't read that restriction somewhere.
Sure. And we have another question that came in. Can an IUL also be structured to help fund adult continuing education or professional certifications, and which are common among educators themselves?
Yeah, so the nature of the cash value within an IUL is that the cash value within it is able to be used at any time. What I would caveat on that is if it is an educator that's looking to help fund education for themselves, the nature of the time horizon requires that they're not really going to get as much money in the first year. So if we go back to this example, put 15,000 in, their surrender value, because there are surrender charges in a lot of IULs for the first so many years, you're only having access to $6,000 of that value to pay for education. So you really need to have kind of time horizon to pay for those educational costs. With that said, the money can be used for that. It's just that might be where a 529 plan, if they're looking for funding for a short-term expense, something that they know that they're going to have 2-3 years down the line, might be a better avenue to consider, because the nature of the way that a life insurance policy works, you kind of need to give it the time to work. Because if we look at that same 529, at the end of the first year, you have $16,000 in value. Now, I will also caveat the 529 is market-based. So it's possible that that first year is a down year and you don't have that much available. So that's the kind of give and take of both of these, is the fact that the IUL is going to give you a little more predictable results. You're never going to, zeros you hear, you're never going to get less than the zero and then some fees. Whereas the 529, you could actually have a negative return year. given a long enough time horizon, it normally averages it out. But if someone's looking to fund education in the near future, it's just another kind of thing to consider, which is why there's no hard and fast rules on which one's which. It's really going to be their ability to tolerate the risk in the time frame that they have and when they're looking to fund. So I think the longer they have to fund, the more an IUL is attractive. The shorter they need the money, the more 529 might be the way to go.
And we have another question that came in. Is a securities license required to sell 529 plans?
That is something that I am securities licensed, and I don't know. Yeah, so you do need a Series 6 or 7. Thank you, Google, for the quick update to sell a 529 plan. I don't personally sell 529s, even though I'm securities licensed, so I did have to look that up. But it is a market-based asset, so it does fall under the securities rule. You would have to be securities licensed, which is different licensing than for life insurance. It would be the same licensing you would need to sell variable products.
And I have a question. Are
Mhm.
withdrawals from either plan guaranteed, or can they be denied or delayed?
So the withdrawals from either plan are guaranteed a word. They are available as long as there is a value in the policy. So a 529 plan is not going to guarantee any performance results, but if in any given year you have $50,000 in it, you can take out half that money. There's no limitation for that. To as long as the value's there. And the same with an IUL. I would always say that whatever you're thinking of taking out an IUL, run an in-force illustration with that as a sample to make sure that the IUL is able to sustain itself and doesn't lapse. But the money that is there is able to be taken out. The carriers are not going to say you're not able to take this money. Once again, assuming that that is the value you have there. So in the early years of an IUL, if you were to say, hey, I want to cash out in year 2 in this example, you're only going to get 21,000, even though the account value has 28 because there's surrender charges. But the company is not going to deny you that 21,000 if you did want to cash it out.
And what role do these plans play in a larger financial plan, like retirement, estate planning?
So this is where, like I said at the beginning, that most people are trying to juggle limited funds. It is part of an overall kind of structure. The 529 would be where you want to use this money instead of leveraging it in other assets. But if you're already, well within, a 401k or whatever for your own retirement, life insurance can be a good supplement to that. 529 is taking money that you would put into another retirement vehicle and dedicating it to education only expenses. So part of the way I like to look at life insurance is that's, I think, a better fit into an overall retirement strategy and overall kind of a wealth building strategy, because you're able to use those funds for multiple things like you are with other wealth building aspects, whereas the 529 is locked in, and the funds there are not able to fund retirement without those penalties that we saw in there.
And we have another question that came in. Is there a readiness assessment you recommend to determine if a client is better suited for a 529 or IUL?
There is not, but that is something that I think we could probably take away as something we may want to put together. It's really going to be in conversations, the what's your time horizon, what's your risk tolerance for market exposure, and what do you want to use these assets for. If their time horizon is short, 529 is probably the plan. If they have no risk tolerance to market, IUL is probably a better choice. If they want to use their money for multiple things, IUL might be a better choice. So it's really going to determine on which way they want to use that, and kind of what it is that it fits into an overall plan for them. So I think we could probably put something together, but it's more than just a questionnaire. It's part of a deeper overall strategy of what they want to do with the funds that they have for these types of instruments.
And I have a question
Mhm.
about mainly about suitability.
Okay.
Like in your experience, what are the common mistakes people make when choosing between basically between these two plans?
So coming from the insurance side, what I find a lot of people who have talked to me that they've done a 529 and wish that they have done, um, insurance instead, is when they realize that the funds are kind of locked in and that they don't have kind of that self-completing nature of an insurance policy. When you start talking to someone about insurance, you of course bring up mortality. And then when people think of mortality, they often go back to the 529 plan and go, hey, I didn't think about what if I can't fund this for the full time? What happens then? So a lot of times that brings into the question of, if I were to pass tomorrow, is this plan that I funded for however many years really going to be able to support the educational needs of the child? Or would I have been better spent putting that into insurance because it has the ability to both grow as a cash value asset as well as have death benefit protection if they were to pass?
And we have another question that came in.
Mhm.
How does an IUL support multi-generational planning or legacy gifting differently than a 529 plan, especially for families who, let's say, want to fund grandchildren or multiple dependents?
So that is a great question. Um, when you're talking about legacy gifting, uh, you're always going to want to talk about have they met their gifting exemptions and stuff yet. But for a lot of especially grandparents and stuff, I've seen insurance used as a great vessel to kind of put the insurance on the child, uh, to have that be a gift to them. So that way it grows with them, and then they have the ability to, once they become of age, of using that money for college educations or for their own legacy as well. So a lot of grandparents use cash value products, like an IUL, for those gifting things because it adds those extra protections, and they normally do it on the life of the child in question. Um, Versus in this example, we did it on the life of the parent. A lot of times when you're talking multi-generational planning, you'll be doing it on the life of the child, which is going to be a little different than what you do on a 529, which is still going to be for the child, but it kind of locks them into what they can access that money for in the future. Um, I don't know if there's any gifting exemptions to that, but I do know that there are limitations to how much that can be put into 529 plans, whereas for IUL, there's no such limitations on what can be put in. So I don't know what the current limitation is on a 529 plan. Like I said, I don't personally sell them, but they are something that the government does say you only allowed to put X amount into a 529 plan, versus an IUL where you are able to put in more than that.
And what are some of the biggest risks in an IUL that people like may overlook?
So an IUL, it is an index fund. So one of the things about an IUL that I think a lot of people maybe don't take into account is it's not a set it and forget it type of product. It should be reviewed yearly, uh, every 2 years or so, to make sure that it's performing the way that you want it to perform. Because there is a correlation to the market. If the index returns to zero, you're not going to have the growth that you would want in there. So it's just something that you want to keep to keep on. But that would be the same with any type of investment product. And this is the same with 529 plans of if you have a bad return year, you've now affected that future outcome. IUL has a little more ability to kind of help you catch back up to meet those goals versus what a 529 allows you to do. But it's definitely something that you want to look at every year. And I think a lot of agents who are new to selling it may not realize that it does require maintenance, even if it's just, yes, it's performing exactly how we thought it would be, to make sure that you don't, see it, 10 years from now and go, oh no, it's not looking how we had planned it. And if we had made this minor adjustment 4 years ago, we'd be on track. It's just something to think of, and that's something that a lot of new agents kind of miss is that maintenance factor of an IUL. And really, any type of product that you sell like this, you should be doing that routine policy review.
And does anyone have any other questions?
Okay. Well, thankfully, we left some time for the Q&A. After I had a feeling there'd be a lot of questions. It is a simple yet complex topic, but really what I would urge everybody to do is not look at just the raw numbers, but look at the story that the numbers are trying to tell and how that actually applies to what the client wants to do. What are they looking to spend on college? How many years are they looking to spend on college? What are they looking to do with the money after? And then we can work, for the IUL for that to tell that story, show what they're looking for, so that way you can better show that, yes, the numbers may not be different, but look, it's actually performing in your real life example of how you want to use and access this money better than something that may have a bigger number but doesn't actually perform the way you would think once you start actually using it in the way that it was planned. So just go beyond just what's the total value before you start taking out expenses or distributions, I should say, and look at what that actually is in total.
And we have another question that came in. Can you provide a side-by-side comparison that can be used as part of my presentation for educators?
That is something that I will work with Dave Jones, another brokerage manager here on, see if that's something that we could put together for people on the call, along with that kind of quick fact-finding sheet that you had talked about. We just want to be careful that when we are looking at side-by-side comparisons, that we're doing true side-by-side. I used all these examples. There's 1,000 caveats that you have to give when you're doing this with real world, when actually talking to clients, that we just need to make sure are done and put together to make it an actual something you can present. Just because, for compliance, there is a lot of things, that we have to take into account with that. So is it something that we could do? It's something we can look at, but it is something that's not as simple as here's these two numbers that I have, let's put them together. There's a couple more steps involved in that.
I believe there's another question that's coming in.
Okay. And just to make it clear earlier, I know we had talked about securities licenses needed. IUL does not need a securities license, so it's one of the benefits of it is that you can sell it without needing to be securities licensed. You only need your life license for it.
And a new question just came in. What is the best way for a grandparent to buy this for a grandchild? Would they have to put the insurance on the parent?
So that's going to depend on some different factors. I've seen most times that if a grandparent's buying, they skip the parental generation and put it straight on the grandchild. With that said, underwriting is going to ask, why are the parents insured? So there are some nuances to that. But for most insured families, I've seen that the grandparents go straight to the grandchildren to be the ones that they're putting the insurance on, assuming that the amount that they want to put in makes sense for that child's age. If not, then normally it does go on to the parent. where it might make more sense depending on how much the grandparent's looking to fund. But with that said, I've seen some pretty high numbers from some carriers on what they'll allow a grandparent to put in for buying a policy on a child.
And we have a follow-up to that question.
Mhm.
Don't they want the parents to have double the coverage that the grandchild is getting?
Uh, that's the depending on what the overall generational strategy is. Um, you are correct. There are going to be coverages there, so that if the parent passes, there is that's benefit protection as well. It really is going to depend on what the overall family strategy is, but I've seen a lot of grandparents go straight to the grandchild. With that, so that it's locked in for the grandchild, because part of that too is access to the funds. A lot of grandparents are there, they want themselves to be the owner, and then they'll have the child be that secondary when they're of age, with the parents as the beneficiary. But that allows the child to get access to the funds, whereas the parent would have access in the other example. So if they're trying to lock it in for certain things, I see a lot of grandparents taking that step to go right to the grandchildren. It's not right or wrong. It really is how they want to plan for that, but that's what I've seen more often than not in these types of strategies.
Cool. Are there any more questions?
Okay. Well, I thank everybody for coming. I know this was a short presentation at the beginning, but a lot of questions after. I hope I covered everything. We do have that takeaway of both um, can you fund private schooling with a 529, as well as some possible materials to send out after to help in these types of presentations when you're actually speaking to clients about why they might consider an IUL versus a 529. So look forward to working with you all in the future. Don't forget, if you have additional questions after this, contact your brokerage manager. And we're happy to go into more detail on a case-by-case basis as things come up and as you have clients that are looking for this and we want to dive deeper.
And we'll also be providing a recording to everyone who registered for this webinar. So be on the lookout for that. And thanks everyone for attending.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thanks everyone. Bye.